Hello, and welcome to the Building Podcast. Today's podcast looks at one of the often overlooked gatekeepers to our construction industry. The vast majority of our tradesmen and women are trained in further education system of education. These vocational centres of excellence are responsible for the calibre, the competence, and the numbers of new entrants who come into our sector each year. They truly are one of the gatekeepers for the success of our sector. I'm therefore really pleased to welcome Graham Hasting-Evans to the Building Podcast. Graham is the chairman of BACH, the British Association of Construction Heads, which is effectively the focus for thought leadership and best practice within the FE construction colleges and other trainers. Graham, welcome to the Building Podcast.
Hi, Mark. Nice to speak to you again.
Likewise.
And nice to be able to talk about BACH, which is the British Association of Construction Heads, and I chair their company board. I'm president, I think, is a title I used to have. And we are really, I think, so important in terms of the ecosystem to help drive predominantly young people into the industry. So great to have the opportunity to discuss that with you today.
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to this because you are the gatekeepers. That's we need 250,000 people in the industry by the end of the decade, and the vast majority are going to come through your members. And so I'm really looking forward to today's conversation, really to understand how we can help you and help your members deliver these people as competent, capable people into the sector. Because if we can get that right, then the outcomes for all our businesses and all our industry is going to be so much better. So that's first question. You've already started answering it. Is really to tell us a bit about BACH and what your role is there. So if you're the president, what does BACH actually do? How does it support your members?
It's been around for 40 years, and what it is, it's a membership organisation for predominantly FE colleges who deliver construction and related building services engineering. So that covers both house building, but also civil engineering and infrastructure, as well as electrical, plumbing, and those sorts of things. And increasingly over the last 2 to 3 years, that the flavour of green skills that fits with that, so solar and heat pumps and those sorts of things. We have well over 100 campuses that are in our membership. All the major deliverers of construction training in its broadest sense, and they do a number of things. They prepare young people to go on to an apprenticeship. They support young people on their apprenticeship, so providing the training for the apprenticeship with obviously the employer, because they're employed by the employer. That's what an apprenticeship is all about. They do upskilling. And they provide a variety of training courses to prepare people to get into industry. So we've got about 5,000 tutors in the country. It's quite a significant number. And we produce thousands and thousands of young people. Not all of them go into the industry, and that's one of the things perhaps we can talk about as we go through. And it's been something the industry talks about and the colleges talk about. I say colleges, we do have some private training providers in our membership as well.
So you and presumably, but the vast majority are effectively government-sponsored FE colleges, aren't they?
Yes. And even the private training providers, they're obviously being funded from the apprenticeship levy or mayoral authorities or whatever. So really most of this is government funded. Yes, the majority.
Okay. Well, that's great. So what are let's start with sort of a very broad question around what the key challenges are facing the members, your membership, because I'm a governor of a construction college. I can think of all sorts of challenges facing us, but let's try and distill it down to some of the sort of the key ones facing that are sort of common across the whole sector.
I think coming across the whole sector is our capacity. It's a real difficulty to recruit and retain tutors, teachers. to support that work. Salaries within the FE colleges, as you will know from your role, are can be half that somebody can earn in industry. Therefore, that in itself is a barrier to be able to recruit people. But also the industry, and green skills is probably a good example of that, and something like heat pumps and solar. You're getting new technologies coming along, and it's difficult to recruit people that got those new skills into the cohort of teachers. So I think that keeping up to date and having the capacity is one of the problems. I think one of the others is around being able to give young people some real experience of what it's like to work in industry. When you're on an apprenticeship, that's obviously easy, isn't it? Yes. You're employed by employer. You're going to college to do some of the training. Some still, one day at college, 4-day working. That's not an uncommon one. Although there's block releases.
Block releases as well.
But you've got that. You've got that. It's the others that are preparing to go into industry, preparing to go on to an apprenticeship, or doing a T level where they're doing those, where it's difficult to engage the employer and get the work experience element of it, and that's a challenge that's faced the T levels. So I think employers can help in perhaps engaging them better in terms of being able to support better support for the organizations to find work placements to get that going, and better support in terms of how we retain and develop tutors. And in that sense, I'm a firm believer that the only way we're going to do that is to have guest tutors.
Guest tutors, Well, it's something we used to do. My old business used to do it on a regular basis. One of our directors used to lecture at the local tech, and very successfully.
It's an old idea, but it actually works. And I think it's got to be a key part of going forward. And I know lots of people are worried about safeguarding and how that all works. And I think it's incumbent on the colleges to find a way that they can make that work and bring that expertise in. Some already do that. One of our members, Exeter College, perhaps I shouldn't name everybody, but so our main members just came into my mind.
They're a centre of excellence, aren't they?
They are a centre of excellence, and they do that, as do others. And Burnley does a lot in terms of the way they engage with people, particularly SMEs. So I think that's always a challenge. It's not just the big firms. It's how do you engage with the micro businesses and the SMEs. Yes, they're more difficult. And unfortunately, I think the way that the apprenticeship levy has been introduced by the government has pushed away the SMEs. They found it a bit too difficult. And we look at the apprenticeship numbers. We go back to 2015 and 14 and that, and we had maybe overall about 450,000 in total, all sectors, apprentices, and we were into the 20-odd thousands coming through construction. We're now down to the sort of 12,000, 11,000, and the big drop has been in the SMEs. So I think there's a real challenge there as to how we do engage with the SMEs, and it's not just something for the colleges and the SMEs. Government's got to play a part in terms of creating the environment where we can actually work together.
Well, let's sort of unpack some of those in turn. You sort of started off by saying that we've got a trouble in the sector of retaining competent lecturers. And I suppose it's worth saying that the salary rates are effectively what colleges can pay, because the government sets the pay parameters that they set the budget parameters that colleges work from, and the vast majority of their costs are salary costs. So effectively government sets salaries, and it's very difficult to pay construction professionals in a college more than some of the other professions in a college which might be lower paid, and construction is a relatively well-paid profession. So these guest lecturers could be one of the key answers to bringing those people through, isn't it? It's
yes, it is. I think that creates and it's interesting, some colleges and their management and their policies and the way they operate their recruitment policies and employment policies, they seem to be more flexible than others. So I think we'd want to encourage more within the college sector to be willing to be a bit more flexible around the way they recruit people and retain people, particularly guest lecturers, and how they handle safeguarding issues around that.
Yeah,
we can see that some colleges do manage that well. So I think I'd like to see more colleges do that. And one of the things BACH is trying to do, and you will have, because you came to the last conference, and thank you for speaking at that, is that's one of the great things about BACH, is it has 2 conferences a year, but it's also got a website, so people feel they can share ideas. And I think you probably saw a couple of good examples. Exeter and Burnley were 2 examples that come to mind, where people are saying, yeah, well, we've overcome those sorts of problems this way, and trying to encourage others to do that. And although I think we recognise that sometimes it's not what the head of construction wants to do, because they work in a college and the college has got its management style and its as you will know as a chair, its processes. So they may very well want to do what Exeter, Burnley, and some of the others are doing, Leeds Building College and you know, Newcastle College Group and others, all these people that are doing good stuff. When they get back home, there are constraints provided by the rest of the organisation, but nevertheless, we still feel we've got to disseminate that good practice to our membership and encourage people. It's the way forward to tackling these sorts of problems. I think government has a role to play in that. We don't hear from government very much the message of, well, colleges, you should really be encouraging guest tutors. Yes.
I
don't think I've ever heard that. I've got a meeting with the twin chief execs of Skills England next week, so I think it's one of the points I'm going to raise with them. Now, when they come into being in the summer, yes.
Well, they've got to get there, haven't we?
That they might pick up something like that as a way of tackling the tutor problem. The other way, which I think we would all like really to see, is for the government to realise that we're not funding skills enough as a country. Yes. And I don't just mean the young people coming through, which is what the main role of the FE colleges is, not solely. They do upskilling of the existing workforce, and that is very important. But I don't think the Treasury and the government appreciate that if they really want to increase productivity, make our country more efficient, drive forward economic growth, which I think is what is needed. And I think that they can't do that without investing in skills. And we've had 10 years of a decline in skills investment, not only by government, but by industry itself. Probably less so at the construction industry, because we've had the levy since 1964, is it? Yes.
It is indeed,
a long time ago.
And we still have a skills crisis though, Graham, so you know.
Well, I think my personal view, having worked in the industry for a very long time, I mean, I come from the civil engineering infrastructure part of industry, although I have worked in housing as well. It is that the problem is always that twofold. One, the industry doesn't have a great brand, yes, in terms of people wanting to work in it, and that feeds its way into the education system. So the other schools don't go, crikey, construction's the best thing to do. Why don't you go and work in it? When in reality, the salaries, wages, and remuneration that people can have is really good. You know, it's a good industry to work in, but it hasn't got that brand. It hasn't got that. I think that's one of the problems, and it's been there ever since I've been involved.
No, it is getting better though, Graham.
It is.
We're improving that brand enormously with particularly some of the technologies that are coming through.
I agree, but it's still there. It's still more work is needed on it. And I think the other thing, which is also being tackled, I'm pleased to say, is the feast and famine problem that has dogged the industry for decades. Yes. Whereby, it's right, build loads of houses now. Oh no, stop doing that. Build loads of motorways now. Stop doing that. And that makes it difficult because you're perpetually creating skills crises by that cyclical process. So, and I really like the idea that the government now has on the CLC and others in the industry of trying to give the industry a more stable work flow into it, which will help with the skills problems. But
yeah, you'd like to think so, Graham. I think one of the challenges we have is that the vast majority of training and certainly apprentices is done by the SMEs and the micro businesses. And actually, what are we on? 95% of businesses in the UK in the construction employ less than 5 people, and 98% employ less than 10 people. And these companies are very much in the now. They're putting, they're worried about where the work's going to be in 6 months' time,
or even next week, or
even next week. Yeah, no, well, but that was being kind.
No, sorry. We both worked in the industry. We know what it's like, don't we?
We know what it's like. And actually trying to persuade those people to take on an apprentice or to train for the future can be a real challenge. And so I'm pleased to hear that your members are seeing how they can engage with those smaller businesses, those SMEs, is crucial in the sector going forward.
Because traditionally that's what used to happen. I'm a lot of my family, my uncles and that were in the industry, and it was really common if we go back, I suppose to the 60s, 70s, for the son or the cousin or to be trained by the tradesperson. Yes. And that was a really common model. You still see some elements of that around, but less. And I think somehow we've got to try and encourage a rebuilding of that type of model. And unfortunately, the government's approach to the way they've managed the apprenticeship levy doesn't help that. I'm hopeful, but I'm not confident that they'll change that when they make changes eventually to the growth and skills levy. I would like to see any of the changes that take place to the levy to actually try to focus on that problem. Yes. And the problem of what we call the Schedule D, the self-employed, who fall into that micro business category and nevertheless traditionally were a good source of training for apprentices.
I mean, not so much necessarily on the lifelong learning, but apprenticeships went through those labour owners. What we used to traditionally call labour owners would take apprentices on, and I absolutely agree with you. It's great to be able to unlock that. I think one of the challenges we have, though, is that increasing the difference in national insurance contributions between the employed and the self-employed, where the employees carry out quite a lot of the ongoing training compared to self-employed, is a challenge for the industry that's trying to professionalize itself and become competent.
Yes, it is.
So, Graham, just coming back to T levels. T levels haven't been widely adopted in the industry. Is there anything that colleges and the industry ought to be doing to promote these? Because in many respects, they can be the answer. They're providing a vocational entry for highly capable young men and women to come into our sector.
Yes, I think when the Sainsbury report came out and the idea of having an occupational based A level, maybe that's what we should have called it.
Yes.
Anyway, to me, conceptually was a good idea. Yes. And I'm probably like you, I did A levels in pure maths and applied maths to become a civil engineer. And it would have been great if I'd have been able to take a more practical A level, that might have prepared me for it. But then, so I sort of warmed to the concept of it, However, the way we've implemented it hasn't worked really well. And I think part of the problem was they didn't think through the career pathways. How do people get into work and which way? And we see there are three T levels in, or there were three T levels
Yeah.
in construction. And I think the planning and design one and surveying one it is a good one, and it's got some reasonable numbers on it. Yes. And it quite rightly, in my mind, fits with a career pathway to take you to be a quantity surveyor, an architect, a civil engineer, chartered builder, etc. And maybe that's all that's needed. The one that tried to compete at level 3 against level 2 apprenticeships for bricklaying, carpentry, and the main building trade, the 4 main building trades, was never going to work. And some of us were telling government it's never going to work. I as president of BACH, went with colleagues to IFATE and said this is never going to work. Yes, but we were ignored. And I think you've got a similar thing talking to colleagues who work in electrical and plumbing with the BSc one. So I think it was thinking through the career pathways and going, okay, let's design something that's like that. And in my mind, I would have probably preferred a T level that headed you into building, yes, and a T level that headed you into civil engineering and infrastructure, and maybe one that was more about the M&E style, because all major infrastructure projects, certainly in clean energy, are, they're half civil engineering, as you will know, and they're half M&E, and and the kit that goes into a nuclear power station or a carbon capture or a wind farm or whatever. It's that blend of the engineering disciplines that produce it. So I if I was going to have 3, I would have cut him up differently and headed them towards people that were going to go into the industry at least level 4, and maybe level 6. Then they would have worked. What that then leaves, and I think we still don't have, is what do you do with the people from 16 to 18 that are going to go on an apprenticeship at 18 to be a bricklayer, carpenter, a steel fixer, plant operative, whatever. And I just don't think that properly thought through. And I think that's not the colleges stitched together study programs and level 1 courses in bricklaying and all of those introductory courses, all of that, they stitch them together. But I don't think that the DFE's got a coherent understanding of what to do with youngsters that are not going on to higher education, be that an occupational based higher education or a theoretical one. And I'm not convinced the curriculum review is going to do much for that. I'm not convinced about program apprenticeships either in construction. I'm involved with a number of groups. I sit on the AELP strategy group, which is the private training providers. I chair their meetings on construction. And I think from those conversations, the 2 sectors that saw foundation apprenticeships as being good were retail and hospitality. And I sort of, my one son works in that sector. I could see how that would work. But I think we're getting a sort of, won't program apprenticeships, foundation apprenticeships resolve the problem of the skills gap in construction. Because policymakers do have this tendency to grab us what they think is a silver bullet. Yes.
We haven't seen one yet, have we?
No, and life isn't like that. Reality. Each has its, and the T level will have its part. Yes, I don't say that we don't need something like a T level, but it's knowing what part it's going to play, and knowing what part something else is going to get people to 18 and become an apprentice. Yes. I know we talked a lot about young people, and you've been a chair in college, and I'm involved with college and private training providers. But I think there's another aspect which perhaps we can come out in this discussion, and that's about skilling the existing workforce. Yeah.
Well, I'm
Perhaps we'll
going to
come
move
to
on
that.
to
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah.
move on to that. But just on the T levels, is there anything that employers should be doing to work with colleges, with your members, to improve the chances of those T levels? If you pick, particularly if you take that professional one for, the building
There
surveyors,
is.
and so
There
what's that?
is. It's making uh, the required work placement. It's a real struggle to get work placements at the end of that T level or during that T level.
So
It's
should
struggle.
employers be coming to their local colleges to
Yeah.
offer that? Is that what
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
asking for?
And inevitably, it's going to have to be the medium and bigger size employers
Yeah,
that are
yeah,
willing to make that investment in perhaps not just their own business, but perhaps the sector as a whole. And some I know are more altruistic or more willing to
philanthropic
do
ones.
that.
Yes,
Yes, than others. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I could tell you a story about what somebody told me on the London. I worked on the London Olympics in terms of skilling people up to get into the workforce. And I worked at Tesla Jail. I worked with the Secretary of State on it,
oh yes.
and it was good. We made it work. People have copied that approach now in other major projects. But
Hmm.
I had some major companies that were really brilliant. Yeah, we've got to do this. It's not just for us. It's for the
Yeah,
industry
yeah,
as a whole.
yep.
And others, and I won't name names, would say, well, when I've run out of poles, I'm going to Azerbaijan. And then
Yeah,
if I
yeah.
run out of them, I'll keep going. Yeah,
No, well, it's getting more difficult to do that, isn't it?
it is. It
that
is.
and that's only going to get worse. It's going to exacerbate the skills crisis in the industry.
It is. And I think one of the challenges that I think employers need to get their head around is that they do need to invest, and they can't just expect, right, I want somebody fully qualified now, fully blue carded, completely competent at this job, and they're just going to appear,
Yeah,
on skyhooks from
no,
nowhere. Yeah,
no.
they have a massive part to play in terms of making the skills system work for the industry. And I hope that the skills mission, which Mark Reynolds is joint chair of, will help tackle that,
Yeah,
because we've got to get employers out of the mindset, which I was guilty of when years and years ago. Just ring up the labour exchange, please send me four
yeah, yeah,
steel fixers. I need 2 plant operators. Da 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 da. And we've got to get out of that. Yes,
yeah.
that just
Oh,
perpetuates the problem.
yeah, and because the other one we do is we keep blaming the CITB for not having the people on the doorstep, and that's
Yeah,
not helping either, is it?
no, no.
But
We need to stop blaming other people and get
yeah,
together and say,
yeah,
look, we've got a shared problem here, yeah, and
yeah,
we've all got a part to play in sorting that problem out.
yeah.
Yes.
But Graham, at the end of the day, it's the survival of businesses should be looking at this and saying, well, if my business is going to be around in 10 years' time, I need some people to deliver my customers' expectations.
Absolutely, but as I think you mentioned earlier, a large number of our people are SME
Yeah,
businesses are SMEs or even micro businesses, self-employed, and it's where's the work next week,
yeah,
and it's difficult.
yeah,
And I don't think policy actually, and the way that we run our skill system, and our skill system is probably complicated. I'll come back to that in a moment. It actually helps tackle that type of challenge, yes.
yeah,
And I think our system, because of the historical levies in CITB and ECITB on the electrical and plumbing side,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
we've ended up with a right model. Yes, we've
yeah,
got different standards, occupational standards in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that is
yeah.
just not helping at all.
No,
Uh, I'm chief executive of NSAN Group. We work in India, and they have one occupational standard for a bricklayer or steel fixer or plant operative across the whole of India. Yes,
yeah,
and then they
1.4
give
billion.
yeah 1.4. Well, there's 70 million in the construction industry, which is
Yeah,
all
yeah,
our population, and they just have one occupational standard for all 31 states. They've got a proper devolution. The states concentrate then on the priorities for them, yes,
yeah,
not arguing about what the occupational standard should be.
yeah,
And I think that's a hindrance. So we've got a really complex situation, and we've got different levies. that don't necessarily work brilliantly together. And
No.
I've always been an advocate of having a single, somehow get into a position where there is a single growth and skills levy for construction, which brings together the old, the existing levies and brings them together into a coherent whole that supports not just the training providers, but the employer. Yes. And I think part of the problem with the apprenticeship levy is the levy is for training providers. And they do need funding. Don't get me wrong. The colleges need funding. Private training providers need funding to deliver the training. That's absolutely necessary. But the employer has got costs. Yes.
No.
And we need to support them if we are to encourage more apprentices. And I mean, CITB levy does a bit of that. Yes. But it isn't all coherently I don't believe it all coherently sits together well. Although I know CITB tries. I'm not criticising them for that. They work within a system that's created not by them but by government.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I always maintained that if we decide to send an individual away for a training course, the cost of that person and the cost of the contribution to the training course, we might get 10% of the costs overall. And that's before we start looking at the opportunity costs of having to find somebody else to come and do their job while they're away. And actually, that 10% isn't a great encouragement to send them on the course. It's just a sort of paperwork exercise to try and get something back. And there must be better ways of doing it. And
I think that becomes then a big challenge when it comes to upskilling the existing workforce. And I know there's been a lot of effort done by the colleges to build and others, IAA, Nigel, building bays to train people on how to do insulation properly, how to install solar, heat pumps, etc. All these things that are around the cleaner energy mission of the government, and that's great. But then trying to get the SMEs and the self-employed plumbers, or electricians or whatever to engage with that is proving very, very difficult because there isn't an incentive. And while somebody's asking them to fix a gas boiler, they're going to carry on fixing gas boilers.
Absolutely.
They're not going to train to do heat pump.
No. Money today is much better. Just before we come on to lifelong learning, though, Graham, I mean, I interviewed Tim Balcon of the CITB recently, and he was saying that we need 200,000 people coming into 250,000, and we're losing 50,000 people a year out of training each year who don't complete a construction course despite starting it. And perhaps this is best exemplified by apprentices, because we've got the completion limit of just over 50%. So nearly half those who start an apprenticeship in construction fail to achieve it and fail to come into the sector.
I mean, that's not new. It's not new. It's actually been like that for decades.
So, but there's the answer. If we can solve that problem, then we start to solve the problem about people coming into the sector that everybody's identified as needed. How do we do that?
Right. How do we do that? I believe that we've got to adopt a whole system approach, and I think over the last 10 years, the government has fragmented the skills system more than it was before. In some ways, although people criticise NVQs, not very qualified was the joke. And there certainly was an issue over quality. I accept all of that, but the system itself was probably better before they reformed it than it is now. Although the quality is better, I believe, of the apprentices now coming out. The ones that actually get finished and go into work are of a better quality. It's just nowhere near enough of them. And I think there is no coherent understanding of I'm putting somebody in a college from 16 to 18. I'm actually getting them properly engaged with employers, even then, for them to understand what the job is, and where they're going. And for that piece of training or whatever we give them properly fits in with a destination. There isn't that sort of whole system approach, that almost career mapping of, right, you're 16 to 18. If you're going to be coming to building, this is what we need to do with you. That then hands you on to the apprenticeship. Then that hands you into work. There isn't that coherent mapping
process
of the system, nor then the management of it, of the individual. I'll go back to, I mentioned I worked on London Olympics, and we set up a system with actually with the support of CITB, and Nigel, who now runs IIA, we set up training system. We set up an approach, we designed an approach, and we started off, and we started to lose 50, the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, lost 50% of the people. So we then introduced proper tasters, and vetting, and that then reduced it down, so we get 80-90%. And we did a similar thing on Hinkley Point some years ago for steel fixing. We put them on a level 1, a tester, and then it was only the ones that we could see actually were going to make it that we put onto the level 2 apprenticeship. And then we had 90-odd% success rates. So I think it's that adopting a whole system approach to it, and really recognizing you are going to lose people, but lose them at college, at level 1 if they're not going to make it. Lose them then, not keep on piling them through the system, and then failing.
It's a huge cost and waste of cash, if nothing else, and in an industry that is desperately short of money to invest in students. It's just, we have to find a better way of doing it.
I think some of it has been the maths and English, if I'm honest. That hasn't helped, but although the government's now, I think, dealt with that, or they think they've dealt with that. We'll see if they have.
See, the jury's still out, isn't it?
Yes. We haven't seen the proof yet, but at least they made the right noises. I think that's part of the problem, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it's this not managing the system as a complete system to get people into work. And when we adopted that approach on the Olympics, we were really successful. So that we'd adopt the sort of filtering mechanism at the beginning, to test whether we thought the person was going to succeed, and the person thought that's the job for me, So you have a filtering mechanism, and then we engage the employers almost straight away. So the employers, I mean, they didn't come to do the training, but they knew that the training was on the site. So the SMEs who are plant operatives or whatever, those steel fixers or whatever, they would come in and say, actually, I'm going to need about 20 slinger signalers in 3 or 4 months' time. Can I have a look and see what you're doing? And they start spotting people they want to employ. So it's getting that better engagement, between everybody in the system. So it's complicated, and it isn't a simple silver bullet, but it's collaboration and better joint management of the process, I think. More clarity. And I think part of the problem with something like the government inventing foundation apprenticeships is somebody in one sector has said, we think it'll work for us. So it becomes a silver bullet that everybody's going to have to do. Then there's all they've got to be employed because the Treasury doesn't want to spend the money, and all of that sort of starts happening. And very soon you get into a system that is clunky, doesn't join up. Somebody does a foundation apprenticeship, that won't lead to a card, so it won't lead to a job. You've just got to think through the coherent end to end of how I get somebody properly trained, properly accredited, carded, and into work, and you have to adopt that total system approach.
I mean, certainly at my college, at Malton College, we spend a lot of time pre-vetting everybody coming onto those courses, because having courses which half the people have fallen out of, it would be an absolute disaster for the courses and the college and conference and everything else.
And some colleges are better than others at that. And some colleges are driven by numbers. The finance director says, no, we've got to have the numbers, they're going to cover the costs. But I understand the tensions.
We get performance payments as well. So we have to get these people through, don't we, if we're going to get the cash we need.
But it is a massive missed opportunity. And maybe the reality is that that's all the numbers we're currently getting out are the numbers that are going to come out in the way we're currently doing it. Yes.
Yeah,
It's just we're wasting money, losing people in the system.
yeah,
But it might not. I mean, it might encourage us to manage the system better so that instead of just 50% coming out, we might get, 2/3 come out or
yeah.
70%. And
But we,
suddenly that
yeah,
really starts to become a game changer.
yeah, we need government to set that environment differently,
Yes.
though, don't we,
Yes,
to
we
make
do.
that happen.
Yes, we
But
do. We do.
before I come on to lifelong learning, Graham, which I know is very close to both our hearts,
Yeah.
can I just ask what your members' view is on the gulf that appears to be appearing between education and employment? There's a growing. I interviewed Polly Harrow, who's the FE Commissioner for Students, who talks about this growing gulf because employers are relying more and more on computers and less on face-to-face interviews, both at university and at college level. Um, and the FE students coming through the FE are the COVID generation who have got quite a lot of challenges because they've missed out a great deal of actually growing up, the sort of things that
Yeah.
working in teams and working out and getting out and about and doing things
Yeah.
because they've been locked in their rooms and locked at home through COVID, and it's having a major effect on their ability to deal with some of the environments they're put into it in the work situation. Is is this more collaboration we need between employers and colleges to try and close that gap, or how do you see that sort of
I,
working out?
I recognize that. I recognize that completely. And even, we as a company bring in young people and you can see it. And you can see it in the colleges. Yet it doesn't seem to, and I think it needs, it's back to the system point, actually, in a funny way. Yeah.
Yeah,
You've got a cohort of youngsters that need something more.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And a system, a funding system and a policy system that it almost ignores that. Yes.
yeah,
Um, and sort of grabs silver bullets like, or put them all on a T level or put them all on the foundation apprenticeships and ignores that there's actually quite a lot of remedial work to do with some of these young people to get them ready to even get onto an apprenticeship. Yes.
yeah,
And I don't think we understand that well enough. Well, actually, I think the colleges do. If you go
yeah,
and
yeah,
talk to my construction heads, yes, and as
yeah,
you
yeah,
will with
yeah, yeah.
yours,
No, I mean, a lot of work
they
goes
know
into it.
exactly what's wrong. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and they understand what the employers are looking for, and they can probably get some support from employers over that. But the system and the funding don't actually recognise that
no,
need.
no,
And I think we've got to change that if we're going to increase the success rate going through the system, because
yeah,
that's part of the reason why people drop out. Yeah,
yeah,
it's not the big one, but it's part of it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's that point you just made around about the colleges understand their students far more effectively and better than the employers do is absolutely right.
Yeah,
I think part of the challenge we have as a college and as an industry is that I think the colleges see their ultimate customers are their students. They're the ones that they have to look after, and they're the ones that actually pay their way. And I think perhaps needs to be a greater emphasis on making these people employer ready, but the
yes,
employers need to make that work. The employers will step up to come and help that transition, isn't it? That's
yes.
the bit we've got to do there.
I agree. I agree completely with you. I suppose, and it's the difference between what I've done out in industry, because that is my background. Um, you're trying to produce somebody to get into work, yes,
Yeah,
and therefore the customer, in my head, and it's true, NOCN as an awarding body, our customers are the employers.
yeah,
Yeah,
yep, yep,
it's they're the ones with the jobs.
yeah, yeah.
And what we're trying to do is help these people to get the skills to get those jobs.
Get the jobs. Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's and in a way, I suppose they're a customer in a way, but you can't just say the student is the customer.
no,
You've got to recognize that you're serving two customers in a way, aren't you? You're serving the employer because they're the one with the job, and you're serving the young person or the student because they need the skills to get the job.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I do accept that there's a mindset in the education system that it's about the student, yes, not about the end point. And in some cases, it's more about I want to get somebody to university because that looks good, and then I've got to get them into employment. And so maybe the way we focus our education system needs to recognise that no matter whether you go into an FE college to go into employment or you go to university to go into employment, you're going to end up in employment.
That's the plan, isn't it? Yes,
that's
absolutely.
the plan.
That's the plan.
And we want that workforce to be super productive, understand AI, understand all the new technologies, and be able to compete against a generation Z in the Far East that's much more work ready.
No, absolutely.
Well, and we've got to compete globally, haven't we?
No, we have, and with your expertise around the world, we can you'll be very familiar with that. Well, just come on to that. Then we talked about lifelong learning. We keep putting it back because there's all sorts of other problems we've got to do in the first issue. If we can assume that the apprenticeships are still the gold standard of education, and perhaps those that finish them have got a gold standard qualification, how can employers and FE colleges work better to give that lifelong learning, that opportunities? Because the world's changing quite quickly, and actually there's no point being qualified as an electrician and saying that's going to do me for 30-40 years in the industry. I need a career. How do we train people up on lifelong learning?
I think we've got to start, and we as an organization have realized this in some years, is when you're developing that apprenticeship or that VQ, NVQ or new NVQ or whatever it is, you've got to break that down into modules, yes, or modules, or even small bites of learning. It depends, and you need to do that in a way that allows you to pull bits out, yes, parts of learning out for upskilling. It was the way we approached the design of the steel fixing one with Hinkley Point. And I know that's 10-12 years ago, but the concept is valid, yes. So if you approach it in that way, so you've got your apprenticeship, and your apprenticeship's got 100 bits of learning, yes, say simplistic, probably 80%, 80 of those 100 bits of learning won't change very much, yes. The basic core skills. Some will change a lot, and some will keep changing every 6 months, 9 months, or whatever. So it's identifying the bits, the parts of the learning that are going to change, and be able to have built into the apprenticeship that as a discrete piece of training, yes, a module or a short course or whatever, and design that in a way that you could just pull it out and then go, okay. We've told you about being an eco operator on construction plant. That's part of the apprenticeship. I now need to be able to train all of my workforce to be able to drive a piece of plant and cut down the need for fuel, and operate it in a green way. Actually, we do have a short course like that, but it's that type of thinking, and unfortunately, it's been taught modularization. When you speak to government, they then put a sort of academic head on it. They go, oh, modules. That's like I did at university. That's half a term. And you go, no, it might only be 3 hours, yes, or a couple of days, yes. And I think we've got to get people around to realizing sometimes these modules or these small pieces of training are small, so that you do, and you and I will know this, we need to train a roofer how to fix solar panels, yes,
absolutely.
We need to teach, and that's a small piece of training.
It is.
We need to teach an electrician how to then get the solar panels working, yes.
That's a small DC qualification.
Absolutely. And you end up with these small qualification short courses, and those courses need to be properly accredited and quality assured.
Crucial.
Crucial. And if we just think forward and we think of cards, yes, and digital cards, then that data can be held on a digital card. And so when somebody turns up on site and you want to know, right, you're an electrician, yeah. Well, do you know how to fix solar panels? Yeah, I've been on that course. There it is. Boom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I've
You're
got
on your
that.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tick. I've done my Granville bit. Yes.
Yeah.
I make sure the workforce is, and you could think of that with panels, couldn't you?
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem for that DFE doesn't get this level is that going back to Grenville, the problem is all about external panels. Yes. You might have done a general course, yes, an NVQ on external walls, yes.
Yeah.
But if you haven't been trained to fit that particular manufacturer's panel correctly,
Yeah.
you're
You're in
not
trouble.
you're in trouble. You're not
Yeah.
necessarily competent.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think as an industry, we are upskilling our workforce, and we are down at the micro level
Yeah.
of what used to be called tech certs, yeah, in
Yeah.
CITV, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think government can conceive that actually in the department. But as industry, we've got to. Once you start talking to the CLC and the people working on the super sectors project in terms of writing the SCEBs, yeah, for the new
Yeah.
occupations, people do understand that. And we're going to have to use the carding system as a means of doing that. So
Yeah.
we are going to have to get to a position where we know for an apprentice, a new person coming in via an apprenticeship, that's the 100 bits of training that they need. Now, 10 of those are going to be needed to upskill our existing workforce. And
Yeah.
therefore, we now need a program to deliver that. Yes.
Right.
Be that,
Okay.
be that through employers themselves, because
Yeah.
some people have got their own training facilities,
Yeah.
be that through private training providers, be that through colleges providing night school and weekends. If you remember Burnley talking about
Yeah.
how they're doing
Yeah.
heat pumps for SMEs, they're doing it on the
Yeah.
weekends, they're doing it in the evenings. So it's getting
That's
that.
when you do it. Yeah.
Yeah, best way of doing it, and a really good way of approach to it, and a great example of a college being very responsive and working with industry, and more of that's needed. But we
Yeah.
have got to upskill the existing workforce. We've got to make that investment.
Yeah. No, it's crucial because we've got to get, as you say, we're competing on a worldwide stage these days. We've got people coming to pinch our staff already to go around the world, and we have to make sure we've got the people coming through and they're capable and competent.
But you're also getting certain countries, and India is an example, that wants to raise the standard of their workers up to international levels to start providing them across the world. They're
Yeah.
already sending people to Japan,
Yeah.
Israel,
Yeah.
in
Also,
European countries,
yeah.
into the Middle East. And if you go around the world, everybody's into, I've got skill gaps, I've got skills deficiencies, my skill system needs to deliver at a much higher standard. And it's all about getting people into work and a high placement rate. Yes, as they would say. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I've trained 100 people, I've got a good 90 of them into work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't seem to quite have that focus in quite that
No,
our
I think you're
policy
right.
isn't crisp enough, yeah, to realize that's what it's all about.
Okay, work in progress, and we've got some work cut out. Great. Let me just ask a sort of slightly more general question, because it's one that's been taxing me as a governor of a construction college. Is that a few years ago, you'll know that the FE colleges were brought back under public ownership.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I was quite worried that that was going to change the culture within those colleges. Do you think that's happened at all? Do you think there's been an effect of bringing these colleges back under public ownership, or do you think they've been business as usual?
Personally speaking, from the perspective of the construction people,
Yep. Yep.
I don't. It's not something that's talked about as being an issue. Yeah.
No.
If you go to our conferences, if we go to our workshops and discussion, that doesn't come out as an issue.
Yeah.
I think it might affect some people in terms of getting capital funding. It affects probably the governors at the top and recruiting a new principal and chief executive. I think there are pinch points on it, and
Yeah.
so I think there are issues. But down at the operational level, there isn't any feedback coming out of the colleges that's caused a massive problem.
Same old problems then.
Well, whether it's actually meant that people can't solve the tutor salary problem it is never articulated in that way. Because
No.
if you were freer of government, yes, some colleges may have then gone, right, well, we're going to change the pay rates. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas when they're now firmly in the public sector, that many of them will see that as much more difficult to issue to tackle.
You don't have the flexibility, do you? No. No.
But generally, it's not the thing to burn about. Yeah, they burn about tutors. They burn about the employers not engaging with work placements and things like that. So and how do you get new skills in that they haven't got, like green skills and things like that. So but not the institutional issue.
Not the stuff. No.
Yeah.
Well, Graham, I'm really aware of time, and we've had there's all sorts of things we could talk about for an awful long time that we've touched on and just skated over. But let me ask you, sort of, give you a sort of the final question to sort of what your three big asks might be for your members dealing in an industry that's actually going through quite a lot of change in itself. What would be your sort of your magic wand requirements of the industry? You could just sort of wave it, and these are the things that would fall into place for you and your members.
I think tackling the tutor problem, yes, the capacity and the skill level in terms of new skills, I think that's crucial. And I think better collaboration between employers and the colleges and private training providers for that matter, in terms of trying to manage the system, yes, as an end-to-end A to Z to get somebody into work. So that where we need the support from the employers for work placements or for coming in and talking to people about how wonderful an industry it is, even, yes, careers fairs and all of those types of things, and engagement in that way, that better working together. And the third one would be sorting out the funding arrangements. So they're much easier, much more transparent, and can help us engage with the SMEs in particular.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All very good points, Graham. All very good points. Graham, thank you very much indeed for your time today. I think we've had a really useful expose to some of the challenges that one of the key gatekeepers, as I say, it is, you do control, your members control who comes into our industry and the caliber and competence of those individuals coming in. Absolutely, really important part to play in making sure the industry can do what it promises its members, promises its customers it can do. And it's been a great expose of some of the challenges we've got, and a call to arms for the industry to really engage with you and your members if we're going to solve tomorrow's problems. So thank you very much indeed.
And I think there's willingness. Yes, I think there's a lot of willingness. Yes.
Yeah. I'm very optimistic. There's a huge amount of optimism.
Yes, I think for the first time for a long time, I think we are in a position where we might actually tackle these things. Yeah.
Good news all around. Well, thank you very much, Graham.
Thanks very much, Mark. Nice to speak to you again.
Likewise.
Cheers.